Well, good morning, Green Valley. Who's excited to be at church today? I know that I am. It is so great to see you this morning, whether you're here in person or online. And I want to jump right into this. But yeah, we've been in this series called Unstoppable, where we have been going through the Gospel of Luke, and we've been looking at how Jesus lived out his mission, that his mission on this earth, even faced with all the things that could trip him up. And one of the things that really stands out, and our hope for this series is that we can learn that we could have that same resolve that Jesus did in order to live out the mission that God has for us in our lives, even with all the stuff that happens in life that could trip us up. And today, as Beth said, is a very special day because it is Palm Sunday, and it's sort of the beginnings of what is known as Holy Week or the Passion Week. And it's Jesus' his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, where he is just exalted as wanting to be put up as a king by his people, but yet he goes and is heading into a week that I think is one of the most difficult weeks, if not the most difficult week on his mission here on this earth, where he's going to experience his death, and he's going to ultimately, though, victoriously end in Easter in his resurrection. So what Jesus is going to do in this week that makes it so difficult is he's going to hit the wall through experiencing physical pain in his life. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how we navigate when we hit the wall through physical pain. Before I jump into that, I just want to start with a couple of questions. The first question is this: how many of you would say that you have a fairly low tolerance for pain? Wow, even less than the last group. You guys are awesome. How about then, I guess conversely, how many of you say that you have a high tolerance for pain? Wow, lots of Raider fans in this room, you know? You knew it was coming, right? So, I think that one of the best ways that we can actually gauge our tolerance for pain, I think, is a trip to the dentist, if you will. And several years ago, I had this dentist. He's a great dentist, but I had this dentist, and I had a cavity, a small filling that needed to be dealt with. And so I went in there, and he was obviously busy because he had lots of patients. I could tell he was in a hurry. And so he looks at me and says, "Hey, look, this is a pretty small cavity. I think I can take care of this without any Novocaine, giving you any Novocaine." That's what he told me. Famous last words, I said, "Okay." So I'm sitting there, and he gets the drill out. You've all heard that noise, at least most of you have. And it gets close, and when he touched the nerve, when he touched my cavity, it felt like somebody was stabbing me in my right eye, and I did what normally people would do when you hit that pain. I screamed. So then he stops, and he says, oh, and so he gets that little poker out that many of you know, that little sharp thing, and he goes in there, that same place, but he had two fingers in my mouth as he did this, and he hit that same nerve, and I did what anybody would do when you feel pain. I bit his finger. And then he responded like anybody would, is that he screamed and then said some words that aren't becoming of a dentist, right? And let me just tell you this, is that if you're sitting in a seat with the dentist, the thing you don't want to have is hearing him yell or swear. That is not a good sign about your appointment going well. But then he ends with this. He looks at me and he says, "Wow, I didn't realize you had such a low tolerance for pain." Another thing you don't want to hear your dentist say, right? They're usually coddling you. Are you in pain? Do you need more Novocaine? Not, suck it up, you wimp. The truth is, in life, we will have pain that comes and goes. Fortunately, toothaches get better, go away. We maybe break a bone, and for many times that gets better and heals, or you pull a muscle, or whatever that is. But there's people, and you would know this if you're dealing with it, there's people that have pain in their lives that doesn't go away, that are living with chronic pain. In fact, I read a statistic that in the U.S. that over 25% of people living in the U.S. deal with some form of chronic pain. And chronic pain is defined as something that's been going on for more than 6 months. And many of you are dealing with pain that's been going on for a lot more than 6 months, but for years. Think about it. 1 in 4 people in this room, or 1 in 4 people watching online, deal with some form of chronic pain. And the truth is about people dealing with this kind of pain is it becomes literally a daily battle for lots of different reasons. It becomes a daily battle in terms of being present because your pain wants to pull you away from what's going on around you and pull you into what's hurting you inside. It's a daily battle for people struggling with pain of having hope, the hope that maybe it'll get better, or maybe this remedy that was suggested to you, or whatever that looks like, that it'll actually work and you'll start to feel relief from the pain, or a hope that says, could I be healed from this? It's also a daily battle to struggle with the question of asking, why is this happening to me? I was reading an article about marathons because we're talking about this marathon of life, and the most difficult marathon in the United States is known as the Pikes Peak Marathon, and it's actually also known as the Mountain Marathon. And if there's a marathon that has a title with a mountain in the title, you know that's not a good thing. I want to show you a picture of it right here. This is the on the way up. So the first 13 and a half miles of the race, you go up almost 8,000 feet, and you go up to 14,000 foot elevation. This is a picture at 12,000 feet. Anybody want to do that? All I have to say is nope. But what's really significant about this is as you see these runners going up, one of the more demoralizing things is you can see where you're going, and it's all straight up, even when you're in the midst of it. And similarly, we're people that deal with pain so often that you're dealing with this chronic pain, and all you see in this sort of marathon of life as you look out is you see like just this mountain of pain, and you're wondering maybe to yourself, how will I ever climb or get over this mountain? And if that's you today, I would just, my hope and my prayer is this, simply this, is that maybe by experiencing how Jesus dealt with his pain during the Holy Week, you'll find some encouragement and hope in how to navigate if you're hitting the wall from dealing with chronic pain. I want to look at just this big idea today, and that is simply this, is that God's faithfulness does not mean that life will be painless. In the reality of life, it's not if, it's when that we will experience some significant pain in our life. For some people, they were younger and they got something going on that's chronic, and they're dealing with things at a younger age. And for many, they've had the blessing of not having to deal with that. But the reality is, we will, as we get older, right? Things start to change. Things start to break. Things start to fall apart. Things start to fall off, right? A month or two, probably 2 months ago, I pulled a muscle in my left leg, and I kid you not, from getting out of bed. I'm in some church, so I'm just being transparent here, right? People would ask me like, wow, you've had that pulled muscle for a couple of weeks. And I'd just tell them, yeah, I was working out hard. I went for a long run. I was too embarrassed to say, yeah, I got out of bed. I was putting my socks on, I pulled my muscle. Pain is a human condition. Jesus himself experienced pain in his own life. In his humanity, he experienced pain. And if you go to the Holy Week where it starts to magnify, Becca talked about it a couple of weeks ago in terms of being in the garden, but Jesus started to feel this agony in the garden. I want to show you, go back to Luke 22, when he was in the garden, he was praying. And it said this, that being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. Scholars say that Jesus was having an experiential moment at this time where he was looking at the mountain and he was seeing and experiencing the physical pain that he was going to endure. That it was so significant that he started to sweat blood, which is a condition that when you're under great pain, great stress, great physical anguish, that capillaries could break and you can actually sweat blood. And he was experiencing that right there. Because in a few days, in a few hours, he was going to be arrested, and he was going to be beat, and he was going to be brutalized, and he was going to be tortured to the degree that the Bible says that it was so significant that he became unrecognizable. For many people that deal with chronic pain, they have said that I don't feel like I'm the same person anymore. that people don't recognize me because I've changed based upon the pain I'm dealing with. Didn't end there. Then Jesus was asked, after he was tortured and beaten, he carried a cross up to a hill to die the most terrible death that you could possibly imagine in crucifixion. There's actually a word, excruciating, that means come from the cross. That kind of death has its own word, excruciating. He didn't die a short death. It wasn't the nails in his hands. It wasn't the nails in his feet and all the torture that he endured. It was a slow death, because the way you die on a cross is through suffocation. You suffocate. Once you can't pull yourself up anymore to take a breath, so the death doesn't happen quickly. I've talked to many people who deal with chronic pain that have experienced it, that says it feels sometimes like a slow death. And yet in all of this pain that Jesus endured during Holy Week, he continued till the end to stay faithful to God and to finish his mission. And my hope is that we, if we're dealing with pain, and as we deal with our pain, as we hit the wall with pain, that we can look at Jesus' example and find encouragement to answer the question, how can we stay faithful in spite of dealing with chronic pain? How do we stay faithful? And Jesus' actions during the Holy Week actually help us to have encouragement in doing that very thing. But I want to have a disclaimer here before I go through these three things. And the disclaimer is this, is that I don't want this to be prescriptive. I'm not trying to tell you what you should be doing. I'm not in your shoes. Everybody's pain is different. Everybody experiences it in a different way, so I'm not here to do that. I went through a chronic period of pain for a little over a year from a head injury that I had years ago. Some of you are saying, yeah, that explains a lot about you. But I only know that. I don't know your pain. My hope in sharing this with you is that we learn from Jesus to have some resolve and to have some hope and to have some encouragement in how we deal with our pain. And three actions I want to look at today from Jesus that maybe helps you with your pain is to stay prayerful, to stay connected, and to stay open. Those are three things. Let me just say the first one, stay prayerful. Staying prayerful. You know, prayer is the foundation of Jesus' life. Obviously it was. And you know, hospitals, there's a reason where the hospitals open up and encourage people coming in to pray. And the reason being is has a very powerful impact that are people that are sick and dealing with pain. And Jesus made this foundational in his whole life. He would, and certainly acutely during the time that he was really in that last Passion Week dealing with acute pain. He prayed in the upper room. He prayed at the Last Supper. He prayed in the garden multiple times. He prayed on the cross all the way till he took his last breath. And the context by which he prayed, I would say, would break down into three types of prayers. It's not exhaustive, but I think there's three key prayers we can take out of this in terms of how we stay prayerful. First one is there's asking prayers. Jesus asked God to remove the pain. He says, Father, if it's your will, remove this cup from me. It's good to ask God to heal. God at times does heal us. I think the question becomes, though, is sometimes he doesn't, and how will we respond? Do we respond if he doesn't? If God's big enough to heal us, which he can, and he's all powerful and that big, I think it would stand the reason then that God's big enough and all powerful to maybe have reasons we wouldn't understand. And sometimes it's no, sometimes it's not now, and sometimes it's yes. But the fact of the matter is there's asking prayers, and it's important for us to go, God, if it's your will, heal me. Second one is honest prayers. It's to be able to share with God right where you're at. Jesus, through his Passion Week, when he was in the garden and when he was on the cross, he was very honest to God where he was at. In fact, on the cross, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? God, are you there? Did you abandon me? Jesus is getting real with God by saying, God, I don't feel like you're here. You ever feel that way? See, the fact of the matter is God can take that. God wants a real relationship with us, and we can be real with God. Therapists will say this, there's a reason for this, because it's important to be able to express how we're feeling regardless of what those feelings are. It doesn't necessarily mean somebody fixes that thing, but the therapists know how cathartic it is because we have it in our head to just be able to identify and locate ourselves right where we're at any given moment. And God's the perfect place to do that. I love King David because King David was the poster child for this. You know, Jesus on the cross, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's praying through the Psalms, which is very powerful. And many of those are David's. And David was this amazing man who also, they say he was a man after God's own heart, but he was also very real with God. And he could just be honest with God. And at times he'd go, here, God, this is where I'm at. And it's not pretty. In fact, one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 13, and I want to just show you the first part of it, because this is David's prayer when he was really hitting the wall. He said, how long, Lord, will you forget me? Forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Leave that up there for a minute. Any of you feel that way? Have you ever felt that way? This is a good prayer, actually, because it's getting real with God. And what I love about David, when I'm overwhelmed with my own emotions, what I love about David is that I realize I'm not the only one that's feeling this way when I'm in that moment, that other people have felt that way, where you're asking God, where are you? It also reminds me that God can take our toughest emotions. He can handle that. But the beauty is that David, he can be honest and real with God, but the beauty is that David doesn't stay there. He kind of uses that and goes and gets honest, and then he moves on, which is the third type of prayer that to stay prayerful with, and that is prayers of gratitude, grateful prayers. Look what David goes on to say when he goes at first 1 and 2. He's talking about, lamenting to God, but then he turns it in 5 and 6 and says, but I trust your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Simply put, what David is saying here is even in the midst of his pain, I'm seeing what God is doing around me and what God has done before. Jesus was the exact same way, is that even in the midst of pain, he could look and find God's faithfulness in the midst of things. See, gratitude is a very, very powerful thing. And I want to be clear about something. Gratitude does not necessarily take our pain away, but gratitude can help take us through our pain. I have a friend who I've become dear friends with over the last 3 years. And the reasons that we became very dear friends at the beginning was a tragic situation because he unexpectedly lost one of his daughters, tragically. And so he and I forged this relationship that God blossomed into a very deep friendship over these last 3 years. And yet last Sunday was the 2-year anniversary of his daughter's passing. So obviously he's in that reflective state and has got a lot of emotion about that, but he sent me a message. And the message was a message of gratitude, thanking God for the friendship that we have. Thanking God that even in the midst of all this difficult times, that God was faithful and looking out for him, and he believed that from the people that were showing up in his life. Again, gratitude does not take away the pain, but it will help take us through the pain. I showed you that picture before, that marathon. Many marathon runners will have that little pack on their back that kind of dehydrate themselves, whether it's electrolytes they lose or water, whatever it is, and it'll just be right there. And as they're going along and they're going up those tough mountains, they will sip that thing. And I think that's a beautiful analogy of gratitude. That as we're going along, it helps us to continue along to take a step. So my question for you on this, before I move on, if you think about this, and if you're dealing with pain in your life, is how has God been faithful in spite of your pain? If you're dealing with chronic pain and you've been going for a long time, how has God been faithful in spite of your pain. Because if you reflect on that, you can add that to your asking prayers and your honest prayers. You could add grateful prayers. So that first one is to stay prayerful in navigating pain. The second one Jesus shows us is to stay connected, that we got to stay connected. You know, when we face challenges in life, I think most of us know this, is that we are not created to do it alone. God did not create us to face things in our life alone, right? I love the story of the guy that was driving his car on a country road, and he lost control of his car, and he went into a ditch, and he got his car stuck, so he went to the closest house possible that was there, knocked on the door, and the farmer opened the door, and the guy goes, "Hey, I'm sorry, my car went into a ditch here. Could you help me pull it out?" And so the farmer says, "Yeah, I'll get my mule, and I'll bring him around, and she'll pull him out." So he brings the mule around, hooks it up to the front of the car, and then he yells out at the mule and says, "Blue, pull." Nothing happened. So then the farmer yells out, "Biscuit, pull." Car starts to move a little bit. Then he finally yells out, "Betsy, pull." And the mule pulls the car out of the ditch. And so the owner of the car is ecstatic, and he thanks the man for doing it. And then he says, so just one question, why does your mule have 3 names? Farmer says, "Mule doesn't have 3 names. The mule's name is Blue, but here's the thing about Blue. Blue's blind. And if Blue thinks he's by himself, he can't do anything. But if he thinks there's other people there, other mules helping him, he can pull through anything." People, it said, don't often give up because something is insurmountable. So often they give up because they're alone. And they feel like they're alone. I've heard this by many people who struggle with chronic pain, that they feel isolated and alone because nobody understands the condition. Nobody understands what they're going through. And yet we need each other to go through things, including pain. Jesus was an amazing example of that when he was in the height of his pain, going back to the garden where he was in this place of extreme agony, and he had his 3 closest friends with him that he took into the depths of the garden. The Bible says that Peter, James, and John, and the Bible says that he started to feel overwhelmed in sorrow and started to feel this pain, and he actually expressed that to those 3. And he says, "My heart is overwhelmed, my sorrow is taking over." And then he goes on to say, "Watch with me." In other words, be with me, stay with me. In Jesus' humanity, he was experiencing that knowledge that says, I don't want to be alone in this. I need you here so I don't feel alone in it. And sadly, the result of that with his 3 friends is they fell asleep and disappointed Jesus. See, I think that's a good reminder for us when it comes to people in our life. If we are not dealing with chronic pain, but you know somebody, I think it's a good reminder, that specific incident, for us to not fall asleep when it comes to being there for people dealing with chronic pain. And when I say not falling asleep, what I mean by that is, it's not saying like you can fix it, but it's just being present, being willing to listen. You know, one of the greatest ways we help is to hear somebody, to be praying for somebody. Connection is such an important thing. One last thought on this as far as the connection side of it. If you deal with chronic pain, we want to offer you an action step with that, and it's going to actually start tomorrow. We're going to do our first ever pain support group here, and we're going to actually do this on Zoom. So it would be an offering where you can come together and you can be with, we have one of our amazing elders who actually has dealt with some chronic pain herself to facilitate that. And we're going to look at things like connecting together about pain, building some relationships, talking about prayer, talking about gratitude, just a gamut of things. It's just going to be 4 one-hour sessions over 4 weeks. It's 6:30 to 7:30, and I would really encourage you. This is a powerful thing because this is the way we get through things and navigate life when we hit a wall, is together. And so this is an opportunity, and you can do it through the app. You can register right there and you'll get a Zoom link. It's free, but it's this power of community. And what we're wanting to do is get as many people together as possible to do this. That's why we're doing it on Zoom, in the hopes that we can journey together and some connections can be made there. And then the last one is this. It's to stay prayerful and to stay connected. The last one is just to stay open. It's just to stay open. And what I mean by that is to stay open to what God can do and how he can use your pain. Jesus, at the end, all the way to the end on the cross, it's interesting, I think, in the story in Luke, they say that Jesus was crucified with two other thieves next to him. In other words, there was two other people experiencing the same thing Jesus was experiencing. And I'm not saying spiritually, but physically in crucifixion. And the Bible tells us in Luke that one of those thieves was seeing Jesus and looked at him and said, hey, if you're the Son of God, why don't you save yourself and save us too? But the other thief who saw how Jesus responded to those that killed him and that those that mocked him had a different sort of reaction to it. And this is what it says in Luke 23. It says this is what the thief said. He says, we are punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I think this is significant because God put somebody there. Jesus had an opportunity through pain to connect with somebody, and through that process, Jesus was able to draw somebody to God. And it's the same way in your life and in my life that God can put people in your life, even if you're dealing with pain. He will put people in your life that maybe you're the only one who would understand, that somebody else won't feel alone because you've dealt with it, or he will attract people to you and how you deal with your pain. I was talking about this support group, and one of the significant things in encouraging those that are dealing with pain is to join, because you might be the answer to somebody else's prayer on this. If somebody else feels like they're alone going through this, and you show up and God uses you to help somebody else, and you won't even know it and realize it until it happens. I think it's very common for people dealing with chronic pain, and I've heard this a lot said to me, I experienced it myself, is when you're in the throes of it, it's easy to feel like you've lost your purpose. And I just want to say this, is that Jesus reminds us that that's the furthest from the truth, that you haven't lost your purpose. In fact, Jesus has other things he wants to remind you. Number one, and I think the Passion Week is the greatest reminder of Jesus' amazing love for us, because he endured his pain willingly so that we would not experience pain in eternity. And he loves us so much that, when I was thinking about this in this dental appointment of mine, if I would have known before going into that dental appointment what I was going to experience there, I would have canceled the appointment. But you know what? Jesus knew what he was going to experience before he went there. And you know what? He didn't cancel the appointment, because that's how much he loves us. Jesus also wants you to know that he cares and understands. And caring and understanding is a big thing for people going through pain. And he is the one who cares and understands because he's gone through it before. And his promise is you haven't lost your purpose. And through him, he has the power to give you a purpose to use your pain, not just in spite of your pain, but because of your pain. The question is, are you willing to be open to that? To say those words, I resolve to trust God with my pain. We have an amazing student pastor here. His name is Joe Yurkovic, and he wants to come up and share a little bit of his story right now. So I'm going to ask him to come up. Maybe we can give him a hand as he comes up.
All right, good morning. First of all, I love working here. It's like the best job ever. We have an awesome family in here, all of you guys, and our staff is so cool too. So everything that I do struggle with, I love the support here, and that just wasn't easy for me like a while ago. So 37 years old. When I was 29, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and they're called partial complex seizures or absence seizures. So I don't convulse and go to the ground or anything like that. I just kind of zone out. It looks like I don't care what you're saying, but I promise I do. And I just get disoriented. My speech will get a little slurred. Things don't sound right. And so it's an awkward situation for everybody. But most of these seizures are only like 2 seconds, 10 seconds. It can be up to 30 seconds, but usually they come in clusters. And so I'll just have a bunch, sometimes in a day or sometimes in a week. And it takes me sometimes hours to recover and sometimes like several days actually for these to recover. So obviously it's super frustrating. And I started to ask the questions like right when this began. When things weren't getting better, all the why questions. Why do I have to miss out on my family stuff? Why doesn't my body respond to medication? Because I'm in the 30%, 30% of the people don't, and that's me, lucky me. So why would God take away the life that I had before? And it seems like, why do you want me to hurt? I know people hurt, but what good can you actually do out of this? So I had these very depressed and discouraging and angry prayers, and that happened for quite a while. So we call them episodes, and when I have these episodes, I miss out on a lot of things or that I took for granted for a long time. In the past, I had much better eye and hand coordination. I have much less energy now. I struggle with reading and writing. It's challenging for me to retain information. And I have tons of memory loss. And if it looks like I can't recognize your face, it seems like I've never seen you before, and that happens to me. I have hard face recognition. And it's really embarrassing, so it sucks. I'm really sorry if that happens. I couldn't understand, why God wouldn't take these things away from me. And it's still tough to kind of think about that. Certainly not how he could use them. So sometimes I feel really unstable and unreliable when these are happening and I can't make it to work or I can't get to hang out with our junior hires or high schoolers. I have an amazing wife, and when this started happening, she just jumped right in and did all this research and all this stuff. I know she was afraid through a bunch of it, but she put all those fears aside and she was all over. And same with my family. Like my parents and my brothers were just awesome, and I'm so glad to have their support. Guys, if you're smart, you probably say you have the best wife in the world. But I got to tell you, I have the best wife in the world. And if you want to talk about this further, I'll be in the parking lot after we're done in here. The biggest struggle I had is with letting people in and letting people help me. Just the pride was terrible, and especially when it came to prayer. I know that I need prayer for others as a Christian, and I was still too stupid to just let people do that. I didn't want anybody to see how weak I was, and so I wouldn't allow them to do that. Now, if I put myself, and this took me a long time to figure out, when I put myself in the other people's shoes, like if they were suffering, I would be all over it. So why shouldn't I do the same when others want to support me or help me? So I eventually understood, like, as I am denying people that the blessing that they are, trying to give me, like by supporting me and loving me, I'm really like denying Jesus too. Who am I to say who can serve me and who can give sacrifices to me? That's not my call, and it's not yours, and we just have to accept it. So now I can really see how God was and is still working through my affliction here. You get to see that pastors struggle with pride big time. We have our doubts, we get angry, and we definitely have time and time again, every now and then, we question God too. What are you doing with my life? So we all have flaws, and mine were exposed to me through my whole situation here that I struggled with. Through my challenges, I got to see the things that I need to work on. So in the end here, like, I'm very grateful for it. I have a few students down in junior high that have the same exact type of seizures that I do, where I get to encourage them, I get to share with them what I'm going through, and give them maybe a little bit of hope. I also tell them it sucks big time, and that's okay. But God's power will always shine through your weakness. I know I have a reason for going through it, and I love that I get to connect with those students in that way. He's shown me the importance of community and how much people love me and want to support me, and how they're willing to make sacrifices for me. It seems like an unconventional way to show someone love, the way that God does it, but we also have an unconventional God. God has provided for me from the get-go, from day one. And when I struggle, God is always faithful. He always shows up. He has provided opportunities. So when I'm talking about, like, how is God faithful through my struggles? Well, he's given me so many opportunities to share that with others and connect with them. His promises are always, he always comes through on his promises. And he will not give you more than you can carry. Sometimes he'll give you somebody that can help you carry that load. So I want you to just take a look around. You have a room full of people that are more than willing to love on you and to support you. So I just ask one question: will you let them do it? Thanks.